Tonight we've got a collection of bedtime stories for kids who've been tapping, watching and gaming, and now need a cosy tale to help them drift into dreamland. Before we do, could you please tap subscribe? By doing this small thing, you'll let YouTube know you love what we do, which will help us grow. Let's get cozy, snuggle down, and I'll begin. This is The Zebra Who Couldn't Get Any Z's by Jane Thomas. On the very edge of Sleepy Forest, there's a sleepy savannah. There's a river that runs along the edge, and in the river live crocodiles and hippos peacefully side by side, nostrils twitching above the surface of the water as they hide from the heat of the sun. And as you go further in, if you look behind the bushes and around trees, you'll spot elephants and giraffes and herds of buffalo wandering around, munching contentedly on leaves and sticks and, let's face it, in the cases of elephants, entire branches sometimes. Rhinos are there too, of course, and a whole load of complicated animals that look a little bit like deer, but are called things like klipspringers and sable antelope and bushbuck. And out on the plains, that's where you'll find the zebras. They're often hanging about with wildebeest who look a little as if they've been around since the time of the woolly mammoths. They live side by side in groups, in perfect harmony, where the zebras like to eat long grasses until they're worn down to a stump, and the wildebeest love to eat short grasses that have been, thanks to the zebra, worn down to a stump. Of course, weaving their way between the trees and the plains and the river are the lions and cheetahs and leopards and hyenas, with their different types of spots and fancy hairdos. And sometimes they'll sleep in trees, and sometimes they'll sleep out in the open. And nobody really ever bothers anyone, because everyone in Sleepy Forest has this wonderful ability to just get on with everyone else. This story is about one particular zebra. He isn't that old, just 6 months, which in human years makes him all of 7 years old. His stripy pajamas aren't quite yet black and white, because zebras are born with brown and white stripes, and then as they got older, they slowly changed the brown to black to announce to the world that they've officially grown up. And he hasn't quite grown into his hooves yet, so he has these long, gangly legs and big hooves, and he looks as though he should be wobbling about, but he doesn't at all. He leaps and lunges and pirouettes and prances along with the best of them. Any ideas what this zebra is called? I'm guessing you said something like Ziggy or Zane, or perhaps you thought about his stripes and came up with something like Candy Cane. Well, you couldn't be more wrong. Our hero of the story is called Toby, which is about as unlikely a name as you can imagine for a zebra. But if you ever meet him, you'll instantly say, "Oh, of course, he couldn't be anything but a Toby. He just has a look about him that somehow fits the name." Well, that and the name tag he wears on his chest. That's another reason you'd instantly know he was Toby. Now, here's something you and Toby might have in common. And I'm guessing you never thought you'd have much in common with a zebra. Have you ever had one of those days that was so exciting, with so much going on, that it made you so hyper and happy and excited by everything that even though you were really, really tired, you just couldn't go to sleep? Everything keeps whirling around in your brain, and it's impossible to make it stop. Toby has a lot of those days. I'm sure you would too if you lived somewhere like he did, with so many wonderful things to see and fantastic creatures to play with. So, he is known near and far, far and wide, as the zebra who can't get any Z's. He just doesn't sleep. Well, he does, obviously, but not when he wants to. Not when he lies down at night with his head nuzzled onto the soft warmth of his mother's big round belly. Not when he gets himself all cozy beneath the branches of a sweeping tree, a pile of grass making the perfect pillow. No, he would just get so tired all of a sudden that he lies down in the middle of the day under the hot sun and has a nap. And when he wakes up from those naps, he's all grumbly and grouchy and grizzly for a while, because he didn't really have a very good sleep at all. And now he's all hot and sweaty and needs to go to the river for a bath, and everything is just too much for this little zebra. So, today, tired of being, tired, Toby's mother has suggested he goes to all the animals he can find and ask them for tips on how to go to sleep. She suggests this partly because it's a very good idea indeed, and partly because Toby kept her awake all last night by asking her questions, and she wants a little bit of peace to have a good long nap all by herself. "Which star is that?" Toby asked, just as she was about to fall asleep. "Can I see a planet tonight?" Toby asked, just as her eyelids were drooping shut. "Did you see that owl flying by?" Toby asked, when she was on the brink of taking a first satisfied snore. And so it went on. "Did you see that bat? How do bats fly so fast? Can bats see where they're going? Is the moon really made of cheese?" The whole night long. It was when Toby's mother yawned so long and so wide that she accidentally swallowed 6 whole flies in the process that she realized it was time for her to get some sleep. And so she has sent Toby out on his mission to learn all about snoozing and sleeping and snoring and dreaming. The first animal Toby comes across, of course, is a wildebeest. "Excuse me, wildebeest," says Toby very politely, as he has been brought up to be a polite little zebra. "Would you mind telling me the secret of sleep? For I am the zebra who can't get any Z's." The wildebeest scratched his head with his hoof for a moment and gave the question some thought. "I suppose," he said at last, "I like to sleep in the very middle of the herd. That way I have 100 other wildebeest all wrapped around me, and it's the warmest, snuggliest, softest blanket anyone could ever dream of having. I like to lie back with someone's head on my belly and my head on someone else's, and our hooves all tangled together, so in the morning it's all confusing as to which legs belong to which of us, and we don't really know until we stand up. And I count the stars in the sky to fall asleep." And the wildebeest paused before adding thoughtfully, "Do you know, I've never counted more than 10 before I'm fast asleep." Toby polite as ever, thanked the wildebeest for his words. And the wildebeest bowed his head and said Toby was very welcome and went back on his way. Toby trotted straight back to his mother, who had just slipped into the most beautiful sleep she had known in ages. And, nudging her with his nose, he woke her up, shaking with excitement. "Mum, Mum," he said as she looked at him with bleary, sleepy eyes. "I asked the wildebeest." His mother nodded her head. "That's lovely, dear," she said, eyes already closing again. "Go and ask someone else." Toby considered waking her up again to ask her who he should visit next. But fortunately for her, a giraffe wandered by in the distance. So Toby kept his question to himself and trotted across the wide open plain. "Excuse me, Mr. Giraffe," called Toby, waiting for the sound of his voice to reach the giraffe's head so very far away before he went on. "Would you mind telling me the secret of sleep? For I'm the zebra who can't get any Z's." The giraffe looked down at the little zebra, far, far below, and then stretched his neck all the way to the ground so he could speak more easily with Toby. "Well now," he said, chewing a pile of leaves as he thought aloud. "I suppose I like to sleep leaning up against a tree," he said at last. Toby was silent, big eyes asking questions for him. So the giraffe continued. "Yes, you see, I find it very convenient to sleep standing up. Sometimes I get terribly hungry right in the middle of the night, and it's awfully good if all I need to do is lean my head forwards a matter of inches, and I can grab a snack right off the tree. I'm very careful about which tree I fall asleep against, you know, lining myself up with the tastiest morsels before I nod off." Toby thanked the giraffe, and the giraffe smiled at him, and then lifted his head once more. He was buried in the tree in such a way that when Toby walked away and looked back, all he could see was the giraffe's legs poking out of the bottom, and the giraffe's head poking out of the top, and no body or neck at all. And Toby had a little giggle to himself as he walked back to his mother. "Mum, Mum," he said, nuzzling into the side of her neck. She had been busy having a lovely little nap, imagining getting her hooves done at the hoof salon, all polished and shiny, and perhaps with a hint of sparkle added to them to suit the latest fashion. And then she woke to Toby smiling excitedly at her. "I spoke to a giraffe." "That's lovely, dear," she said, still half asleep. "Why don't you go and ask someone else?" She was about to fall fully asleep again and go back to the hoof salon when she had a thought. "Listen, Toby," she said, with a lot of love but a lot of exhaustion piled in together. "Go and talk to 5 other animals. Then come back and tell me all about it." She blew him a kiss and then fell fast asleep in an instant. Toby considered waking her up to ask which 5 animals he should ask, when, fortunately for his mother, he saw a leopard strolling by in the distance. Toby trotted off, dust kicking up from his hooves as he ran, and then skidded to a halt beside the leopard. "Excuse me, leopard," he said, stopping the leopard just as he was about to leap up a tree. "Would you mind telling me the secret of sleep? For I am the zebra who can't get any Z's." The leopard, who was on her way to take an afternoon nap, decided to delay her sleep to help the zebra out. The leopard could think of nothing worse than not being able to sleep, or indeed not have any Z's, because it was a big part of every day for her. "Do you see that branch up there, little one?" she said, pointing towards a bough that draped and swooped. Toby nodded. "Well," the leopard went on, "I like to find a bough just like that so I can lie in it and let my tail hang down and swish and sway in the breeze. If I'm very lucky, I will find one with a nice padding of soft moss that I can use as a pillow." The leopard looked at Toby and looked at the tree and said, "I'm not sure that's terribly helpful. Can you climb trees? I have claws in my paws, but your hooves are shiny and smooth." Toby tried to climb the tree but kept slipping down, landing with a bump and a thump at the bottom. "Maybe," said the leopard kindly when he had crashed down for the 4th time in as many minutes, "you just aren't supposed to sleep in a tree. Perhaps some other animal has the magic formula for you. Look, there's an elephant. Go and ask him." With that, the leopard disappeared into the tree in a quick leap and a bound and a jump, and nestled into the curve she had been eyeing up for some time now, leaning her head into the soft patch of moss and letting her tail down to swing in the breeze. Toby called up to thank her, then pounded away to catch up with the elephant. Elephants are surprising creatures. If you don't keep your eye on them, they'll have disappeared behind a bush before you know it, and you never see them again. When he was close, Toby called out, "Excuse me, elephant," panting a little after all his running. "Oh, would you mind telling me the secret of sleep? For I am the zebra who can't get any Z's." The elephant paused on his way and looked down at the zebra. "Look at my size," he slowly said. And Toby did indeed look at the huge size of the elephant standing before him. "Do you know how much I have to eat every day to keep this size?" Toby shook his head, his mind racing, trying to guess how much. "A lot," was the answer. "An awful lot. More than you can imagine. So my favorite thing is to sleep and eat at the same time." Toby's eyes grew wide. "You can do both at the same time?" he said, impressed by what he could only think of as a magic trick. The elephant nodded solemnly, reaching forwards to pull a branch from a tree and start inserting it into his mouth as he spoke. Toby tried not to look. His mother had taught him to be polite and that very much included not speaking with your mouth full. The elephant spat out bits of leaves and bark as he spoke. "I have to," he said. "Very important to me. I only sleep about 2 hours a day, too. I'm not sure I'm the best to answer your question. Look, if you're very quick, you might just catch that hippo. Why don't you ask her?" Toby said thank you and trotted off towards the hippo, all the while wondering if he could master the art of sleeping and eating at the same time. He managed to catch the hippo just as she was about to slip into her afternoon mud bath. "Excuse me, hippo," he said. "Would you mind telling me the secret of sleep? For I am the zebra who can't get any Z's." The hippo squelched her way into the edge of the muddy pool, feeling it ooze beneath her feet in the glorious, delicious way mud manages to do. "I like to sleep under water," she said, and Toby opened his eyes even wider than when he'd heard the elephant say he liked to eat and sleep at the same time. "You see, I sleep under there, and when I need to take a breath, my body just floats to the surface for me. And I breathe, and then I sink down again." "How often?" began Toby, but the hippo interrupted him, guessing his question. "Every 5 minutes, she said solemnly, smiling a little as the zebra's eyes opened wider and wider. "And for how—" began Toby, but again the hippo interrupted him, having guessed what he would ask. "For 10 hours, she said, nodding her head slowly to confirm it. "And I like to fit in a 3-hour nap in the day too," she added, waddling further into the mud and sinking in so only her nostrils and eyes and ears poked above the surface. Toby walked over to the edge of the muddy pond where the water was clearer and stuck his head inside. He closed his eyes and held his breath, and 10 seconds later pulled his head out to breathe again. He tried it so many times, each time taking a bigger gulp of air and holding it as best he could, but in the end he had to give up. "I'm not sure that's the best way for you to sleep, little one," said the hippo. "It works for me, but might not work for you. Why don't you ask someone else? Try and find a lion. They are the champion sleepers." And with that, she disappeared into the mud completely. Toby called out a thank you, even though he could no longer see the hippo, and headed off to find a lion. It didn't take him long. There was one fast asleep beneath the tree. He was about to wake her up with a poke of his nose and ask, "Would you mind telling me the secret of sleep? For I am the zebra who can't get any Z's," when he remembered some very good advice his mother had given him once. "Let sleeping lions lie," she had told him. And when Toby had asked why, she just said, "You've never met anyone as grouchy as a lion who has been woken up. So, instead, Toby sat and watched the lion for a while, noting how she had chosen a place in the shade of the tree so she wouldn't get too hot in the sun, and how her tail flicked around to keep the flies away from her, even though she stayed asleep, and how her head rested comfortably on her paws, so she had a perfectly good mobile pillow. As he watched, a tortoise wandered by, so Toby took the opportunity to ask him his fifth animal. "Excuse me, tortoise," he said. "Would you mind telling me the secret of sleep? For I am the zebra who can't get any Z's." The tortoise blinked at him a few times, and then said, "Well, for me, I just disappear into my shell, and there I am, in a cool, dark place, ready for sleep. I can't recommend it enough." He looked across at Toby thoughtfully. "Of course, you don't travel with a shell, do you? Perhaps you'll have to find another way." With that, the tortoise tucked himself into his shell, his legs and his tail and his head all disappearing inside, and it wasn't long before Toby heard the soft echoes of snores coming from within. He trotted back to his mother, who was just waking up from her glorious nap, looking down at her hooves and feeling a little sad they didn't have the sparkle she'd dreamed about, but mentally putting into her calendar a visit to the hoof salon in the near future. "Mum, Mum," called Toby. "I spoke with so many animals. I spoke with a leopard, and an elephant, and a hippo, and a tortoise. And I looked at a lion, but I did just as you said, and I let her carry on sleeping." "Very good, dear," said his mother, smiling fondly at her little zebra. "And what did you learn?" Toby thought about it for a minute. "I suppose," he said slowly, "I suppose I learned that everyone sleeps differently. They all had different places and ways they liked to sleep. And," he added a little sadly, "none of their ways worked for me. I can't climb trees, or eat while I'm sleeping, or sleep underwater, or sleep for 20 hours a day, or disappear inside my shell." "Perhaps, Toby," said his mother kindly, "you just need to work out what makes you fall asleep. Look at all the other zebras," she said with a swish of her tail to point out a whole herd of them. Toby looked and saw that the zebras were all standing up, knees locked in place, eyes shut. And then, moments later, some of them were awake again, moving forwards and eating, before closing their eyes once more and being asleep. "They're sleeping, standing up?" said Toby curiously. His mother nodded. "And they only sleep for little bits at a time?" His mother nodded again. "So," he said at last, I don't need to lie down and sleep for 8 hours a night? His mother shook her head. That works for some creatures, dear, but not for others. We're all different. We do different things in the day, and we do different things in the night. And that's okay. Some creatures sleep on their front, with their arms wrapped around a pillow, and some sleep on their side, with their knees tucked up to their chest, and some sleep on their back, with a blanket right up to their chin. Some sleep with a pile of blankets and like to be cozy and warm, and some sleep with the window open and their feet sticking out from the end of the bed, because otherwise they get too hot. Toby was amazed at all the different ways creatures could sleep. So, he said slowly, should I try the zebra way? His mother nodded. I think that's a very good idea, she said. Toby stood and locked his knees in place and let his eyes shut. And for a full 5 minutes, he was fast asleep. And then he woke up and moved forwards and ate some grass and smiled to his friends. And then, once more, he locked his knees and closed his eyes and fell fast asleep. And he found that even in those few minutes, he could have wonderful dreams, in which he could climb trees and swim for hours underwater, and disappear inside a home that he carried around on his back, and all sorts of amazing things that are only possible when we fall asleep and let ourselves be carried away by magic carpets and shooting stars and on the wings of fairies. This is Betty Badger's Bakery by Alicia Ainsley. Betty Badger's alarm clock gently chimed and she stirred, rolling over in bed to turn it off. She sleepily opened up her heavy eyes to check the time. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. Perfect. 2 o'clock in the morning wasn't an unusual time for Betty Badger to be waking up, for you see, badgers are nocturnal animals, which means they mainly come out at night. And being nocturnal was perfect for Betty Badger, as it meant that she had plenty of time during the night to prepare everything for when her shop opened in the morning. Betty Badger owned the most popular bakery in the whole of Sleepy Forest. Animals and magical creatures from all over journeyed to Betty Badger's bakery with the intention of buying a delicious baked good or two. She had built up a stellar reputation with her delicious creations, and there was always a long queue already waiting outside her bakery door when she flipped over the closed sign to open. Betty worked all the way through the night, baking up a vast variety of sweet treats, fresh pastries, and loaves of bread to delight her customers with. With so many eager customers coming through her bakery door every day, Betty needed to whip up a huge selection of delicious treats. Luckily, Betty had a few eager helpers that assisted her in the kitchen to get everything ready. They were her children, Ginger, Chip, and Lavender. Betty's 3 little badgers adored helping out their mother in the kitchen, and they were quite the little bakers themselves. Ever since they had been just teeny, tiny badger cubs, Ginger, Chip, and Lavender had shown an interest in baking. Watching their mother work so hard every day and enjoying the delectable treats she produced, they had always wanted to learn how to do what she did. So, as soon as they were big enough, Betty began teaching them how to bake too. With the help of her 3 little badgers, Betty was able to make dozens of batches of cookies, cakes, breads, pastries, pies and donuts each night. Betty liked to say that the food in her bakery tasted so good because it was made with love, teamwork, and a sprinkle of family magic. So as soon as her alarm went off at 2 o'clock in the morning, Betty rolled out of bed and prepared to get to work. She brushed her hair and wrapped her yellow pinafore around her waist, and then headed over to her children's room to wake them up. Ginger, Chip, and Lavender all slept in the same bedroom in their own little beds side by side. Their bed covers all had pictures of cupcakes on, and they each had a woven dream catcher hanging above their beds. Betty wondered what wonderful dreams the dream catchers had managed to catch that night. Betty gently nudged each of her children in their peaceful beds and whispered, "Wakey, wakey, rise and shine, my little muffins." Ginger and Chip began to stir and stretched their fuzzy little arms above their heads, preparing for the day ahead. But Lavender buried her head beneath her pillow instead. She whimpered, "I'm tired. I don't want to get up." Betty stood back and giggled at her sleepy daughter. "Oh, that's a shame," said Betty with a smile. "I was going to let you ice the sponge cake today. But if you'd rather stay in bed, I'll just do it myself." All of a sudden, Lavender pulled the pillow back away from her head and she shot up out of bed. Lavender loved icing cakes. She adored squeezing the piping bag and designing her own swirls and patterns with the icing. Betty knew that this promise would be enough to get her daughter out of bed. The 3 little badgers all brushed their hair and put on their aprons. Ginger wore a sky blue apron, Chip wore a soft green, and Lavender wore a light purple one. Then they all headed to the kitchen that backed onto Betty's bakery. Betty's bakery kitchen was huge. It was the biggest room in their house to accommodate all of the work that went on in it. There was a wall of ovens and a large kitchen island to work at, cupboards upon cupboards full of baking trays and mixing bowls, and several drawers full of utensils like spatulas, whisks, and rolling pins. The walls were painted a soft yellow, Betty's favourite colour, and all of the cupboards were creamy white. A large blackboard was hung up on the main kitchen wall, and on it, scribbled in chalk, was today's bakery menu. The 3 little badgers stood beneath the chalkboard and read the menu. This morning, on top of their usual bakes, they needed to make 6 loaves of bread, 2 dozen raspberry and white chocolate cupcakes, 1 dozen seeded bagels, and a big cream cake. Ginger, Chip, and Lavender all began to buzz with excitement, and they turned to their mother for instruction. "What shall we make first?" cried Chip with anticipation. Betty looked at her 3 eager children, then at the board, and contemplated. Betty decided. "Ginger, how about you get started mixing the ingredients for the bread dough? Chip, you can start on the sponge mix, and Lavender, you can grab the seeds for the bagels. I'll begin whipping up the bagel mixture." The 3 little badgers all nodded obediently and wandered off to get to work. They all washed their hands with soap at the wash basins and then headed to their respective baking stations, ready to get their paws stuck in. On the way to her station, Lavender paused and asked her mother, "I do still get to ice the cake today, right?" Betty chuckled and assured her daughter that she would indeed get to ice the cake, as promised. "Can I sprinkle the seeds on the bagels?" called out Ginger. "Can I dust the cupcakes?" piped up Chip. Betty reassured all of her children that they would all get a chance to do the fun decorating tasks too. But first, they needed to make the basis of all the food. Ginger picked a large mixing bowl out of one of the cupboards and placed it on the worktop. Then he began to collect all of the ingredients he would need for the bread dough. He needed a bag of flour, some salt and yeast, and a jug of water. The ingredients for bread are surprisingly minimal. Betty always said that it's the kneading and baking process that makes her bread extra special. Betty often liked to add surprise flavors to her loaves of bread using herbs such as rosemary, thyme, and basil. Plus, her cheesy garlic bread was a big hit whenever she made it. Perhaps today she would make a selection of different flavors for her customers to choose from. While Ginger combined his ingredients in a mixing bowl, Chip collected his ingredients for the sponge mix. The sponge mix would be used for both the cupcakes and the cream cake, so he needed to make a lot of it. He, too, needed flour, but he also required sugar, eggs, butter, baking powder, and milk. Cake mix was much more complex than bread dough, and it could often get messy. Luckily, Chip loved getting messy. Chip got stuck into combining his cake mix, while Betty made her bagel dough on the other side of the kitchen counter. Betty had been baking for so many years that she was much quicker than her young children. However, she couldn't do it all alone. Her bakery had become too popular. She was grateful for her children's help in the kitchen. As she watched her 2 sons crack eggs, sprinkle salt, and weigh out the flour, she beamed with pride. Just as Betty was finishing up her bagel dough, Lavender appeared by her side with a basket full of seeds. "Here you go, Mama," Lavender said proudly, placing the basket down on the worktop. "The squirrels got a good mixture of seeds for us today. There are poppy seeds and sesame seeds, plus a few caraway seeds." Betty smiled gratefully and replied, "Those all sound delicious. They will be perfect on our bagels." Betty placed the basket of seeds to the side, next to the bagel dough, and walked around to inspect Ginger and Chip's mixing bowls. Ginger's bread dough was perfectly gooey, and he was in the process of rolling it up into a big ball when Betty walked over. He sprinkled some flour on the kitchen surface and tipped the ball of dough out onto the worktop. It was time to knead the dough. Ginger pushed his palms into the ball of dough, creating a big dip in the center with a satisfying squish. Then he picked up the edge of the dough and folded on top before repeating the motion. Kneading the dough was important to ensure that lots of air bubbles worked their way into the dough. Without lots of air bubbles inside, the dough wouldn't inflate during baking, so it was an important process. Ginger loved kneading dough. It felt like Play-Doh in his hands, and he delighted in the motion of squishing, over and over again, until it was just right. When Ginger believed the dough to be ready, he rolled it up into a big ball, placed it back inside the mixing bowl, and covered it with film. "I've made the bread dough," declared Ginger, and Betty patted him on the back. Now the dough would need to be left to rise for an hour or so before they could tear it up into smaller chunks to make loaves of bread. Baking was all about patience. The bread dough and the bagel dough would need to be left alone to rise for a while before they could be baked and finished. So, in the meantime, the badgers could all focus on making the cakes. Chip's cake batter was ready to go, and so the other badgers set about preparing the next steps. Lavender took a couple of cupcake trays out of the cupboard and placed them on the worktop. Then she placed a wrapper in each cake tin. Ginger grabbed 2 large cake tins from another cupboard and lined them with baking paper, while Betty collected the white chocolate chips and raspberry pieces. Betty assisted Chip in pouring out some of the cake batter into the 2 lined cake tins that would be used to make the cream cake, ensuring none got spilt or wasted. Then, when those tins were full, she began to add the white chocolate chips and raspberry pieces to the remaining batter in the bowl. She gave it all a good mix-up with a wooden spoon, sloshing the mixture around the bowl with expertise, and then they all set to work dividing the remaining batter between the cupcake wrappers. Ginger, Chip, and Lavender each used a big tablespoon to scoop out the white chocolate and raspberry mixture from the bowl and dollop it into each cake wrapper until there was nothing left. When the mixing bowl was empty and the cake tins were all filled, Betty looked at her 3 little badgers, who all had mischievous grins on their faces. She paused, smiled, and laughed. "All right, then, you can now lick the spoons." Right on cue, Ginger, Chip, and Lavender all excitedly cheered and licked the leftover batter off their wooden spoons, giggling with glee as they did. They loved making cakes together purely for this reason. The sweet, sticky batter was delicious, and they licked up every last bit off their spoons. Betty switched on the ovens and lined up the cake tins ready to go inside. Betty always handled the ovens whilst the kids cleaned down their baking stations to prepare for the next steps of their morning baking. Once the cakes were in the oven, they all washed up the bowls and spoons and wiped down the kitchen worktop together. Lavender put extra bubbles into the washing up bowl and had lots of fun playing with them while she cleaned. She scooped up a big handful of white bubbles and spread them across her chin. She turned around to her brothers and declared, "Hey, look! I've got a beard!" Ginger and Chip started to giggle deliriously and wanted to have a go too. Chip picked up some bubbles and placed them on his head. "Look, I have a hat," he announced, and they all laughed. Then Ginger gathered up some bubbles in his hands and blew them everywhere, announcing that he had created magic. The 3 little badgers all laughed hysterically at their mischievousness, and Betty watched on from the other side of the kitchen with a smirk. Meanwhile, Betty divided up the bagel dough into round pieces, poked a hole in each, and put them in a big pan to boil while she set to work on the loaves of bread. When the bagels were ready, she placed them on a baking tray and called out to her children, "If you want to sprinkle the seeds on top, then you'll need to dry your hands and clean up those bubbles on the floor." The three little badgers did as they were told and raced over to the bagels to finish them off together. Lavender brushed egg yolk over the tops of them, and Ginger and Chip sprinkled the seed mix from the basket over the top to finish the bagels. Betty placed them all on a baking tray, lit up another oven, and placed them inside. Lastly, Betty added a few finishing touches to the loaves of bread, sprinkling herbs and cheese over the tops of their doughy creations, and then placed them in a separate oven. Betty instructed each of her children to watch over the varying baked items through the oven doors to ensure none of them burnt. Ginger was in charge of the bread, Chip in charge of the cakes, and Lavender was in charge of the bagels. While her children carefully watched over the differing cakes and breads in the oven, Betty whipped up a bowl of icing and filled up a piping bag with frosting. She checked the clock on the wall. It read 5 o'clock. They had just enough time to allow the cakes to cool and decorate them ready for the shop opening. As soon as the cakes and loaves of bread had baked to perfection, Betty lifted out each tray with a pair of oven gloves and placed them on the cooling racks. Chip gazed at the sweet-smelling cupcakes adoringly and sniffed the air with longing. But Betty reminded him, "Don't you go taking one. They will all be very hot, fresh from the oven. We need to let them cool down." While their baked goods cooled, the whole family set to work dusting, sweeping, and wiping down Betty's bakery. The quaint little shop was only small, so it was easy to clean, and they had it finished in next to no time. Betty gazed around her precious shop with pride. She couldn't wait for her customers to see what they'd been baking all through the night. Returning to the kitchen, the air was filled with the mouth-watering scent of freshly baked bread. Instinctively, Betty, Ginger, Chip, and Lavender's bellies all rumbled with desire. But these loaves of bread weren't for them. They were for Betty's customers, and they still had a lot to accomplish before the bakery opened. Once the cakes had all cooled down, Ginger, Chip, and Lavender picked the cupcakes out of the trays by their wrappers and placed them on the worktop to be iced. At the same time, Betty carefully extracted the 2 round slabs of sponge cake from their tins and placed them down to be iced. Lavender rushed to her mother's side enthusiastically and whispered, "Remember, you said I get to ice the cake today." Betty passed a spatula to Lavender and replied, "Yes, I did. Let's get to work then." Whilst Ginger and Chip worked together to ice the cupcakes, Betty and Lavender coated the top of one of the large sponges with buttercream and strawberry jam, and then they placed the other circle of sponge on top. Next, they set to work spreading white icing all over the top and sides of the 2-tiered cream cake. They delicately slathered the icing on with gentle motions of their spatulas and ensured that no spot of sponge was uncovered. To finish off their creamy creation, Betty helped Lavender decorate the top of the cake with perfect, pretty patterns using a piping bag. They held the bag together and twisted and squeezed it to splurge frosting shapes around the top edges of the cream cake. When it was finally finished, it looked like a work of art. Ginger and Chip were equally as proud of their cupcake creations. They added the finishing touch to their frosted cupcakes by tapping multicolored sprinkles onto them, and stood back to admire their handiwork, giving each other a high five. Betty observed all of the beautiful baked delights they'd made as a team this morning and clapped her hands together with delight. "Well done, my little badgers," she cried. "We did it, yet again. The customers are going to love what we have made for them today." They all carried out the loaves of bread, bagels, cupcakes, and the big cream cake together into the bakery, stocked the shelves, and filled the cabinet. Gazing at all of the various delicious baked items in the shop cabinet, Betty smiled and said, "I think we worked so hard tonight that we should enjoy a little of this for ourselves." Betty took one loaf of bread off the shelf and then turned to her 3 little helpers. She gestured to the pretty iced cupcakes and whispered, "Go on, you can each have one for your hard work." Ginger, Chip, and Lavender all leapt for joy and picked a cupcake each from the shop cabinet. They didn't waste any time getting stuck into them and gobbled them up within seconds. As always, they were absolutely delicious. The 3 little badgers licked their fingers clean and thanked their mother. "Right," Betty announced, clapping her paws together. "Let's open up." Lavender opened up the rolling blind that covered the large front window to the bakery and gasped as the sunlight streamed in, lighting up the room. Already there were animals queuing up outside the bakery door, waiting to come inside. "Wow, Mama," Lavender exclaimed. "You have lots of customers already." Ginger responded, "That's because Mama is the best baker in Sleepy Forest." Betty smiled proudly and added, "We all are the best bakers in Sleepy Forest. I couldn't do it without your help." Betty gave her children a big hug and then walked over to the shop door. She unlatched the lock and turned the sign hanging on the door to open. She glanced over her shoulder back at her little badgers and whispered, "You all go have fun now. I will take it from here." With that, Ginger, Chip, and Lavender walked back into their house to enjoy the rest of the morning before having a much-needed rest. And Betty opened the door to her bakery and greeted her first customers of the day. "Welcome to Betty Badger's Bakery," she announced to her customers. The customers all stepped inside and browsed the scrumptious treats on display with a collection of audible gasps, oohs, and ahs. Betty stepped behind the counter, cleaned a smudge of icing sugar off her pinafore, and smiled as she asked her first customer, "So, what would you like today?" This is Potato and Beans Sleepy Planet Parade by Susanna McLaughlin. On one warm, sunny afternoon in the middle of nowhere, 2 roller skating diner cats, Potato and Beans, were minding their own business topping up teacups and serving slices of pie to the animals that came and went, when a little chicken flew through their door all aflutter. Here was Chimpkin, the teenage editor of the local paper, who was always popping in to find out a news story or just chat about nonsense with the two cats. It was evident that this time she wanted to talk business, as she had an excited hop in her knobbly knees and was waving sheets of notepaper as she beelined towards the counter. "Oh, you'll never guess what?" Chimpkin gushed. "Today's an important day. The first time in ages. In decades. Years. And years that... Oh, it's just so wonderful." "Hey, Chimpkin," Potato purred, pulling out the blender and getting started on Chimpkin's favourite kind of strawberry milkshake. "What on earth are you babbling about, Sweet Pea?" Chimpkin took a deep inhale and plonked herself down on one of the bar stools to catch her breath. As Potato slid the tall glass of milkshake across the counter, she caught it in her wing and took a big, long sip. "Oh, that's better," Chimpkin said. "So, I have news. It's the most magical thing. The planets are aligning. Tonight, above the desert, 6 planets will be visible, just hanging there in the sky. 6! Can't you believe it?" Mrs. Pig, the diner's chef, came through from the kitchen, leaving the saloon doors swinging behind her. "I can," she said. "Mr. Pig hasn't stopped talking about it all week." Mrs. Pig's husband worked at NASA, the National Association of Space Animals, so if anything was happening in the sky, he knew about it. "Exactly," Chimpkin said. "It's big news." She turned back to Potato and Beans, who were looking a tad confused. "Usually we can just see stars overhead, right? And the moon?" The two cats nodded, bemused. "Well, sometimes we get lucky, and as a planet travels around the sun, it crosses through our sky, and we can see it." Beans nodded. "I've seen Mars before," she said. "It looks just like a star, but kind of brighter and more golden." "That's right," Chimpkin said. "But tonight, 6 planets will be crossing our sky at the same time. A planetary parade, they call it. We'll be able to see all the major planets in our solar system, if you don't count Pluto." "Poor Pluto," Mrs. Pig sighed. "No one ever counts Pluto anymore." Chimpkin carried on. "So you'll be able to see Mars, Venus, Mercury, Jupiter, Neptune, and Uranus. You'll be able to see most of them with your naked eyes. Uranus and Neptune you'll need to use a telescope for, as they're further away." "That's right," Mrs. Pig said. She raised a trotter. "To remember their order from closest to the sun to the farthest, you just use the letters of the sentence. My very easy method just speeds up naming planets. You get Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Pluto the dwarf planet." Beans put her paws on her hips and said, "And back to this planetary parade, it happens how often?" "Only once every few decades," Chimpkin said. Potato watched Beans with a glint in her eye. "You know what that means, Beans said. It's the perfect opportunity for a party, Potato finished, wiggling on the spot in excitement. A planetary parade party, Beans confirmed, nodding wisely. The other animals cheered. Chimpkin said that was such a wonderful idea. In fact, the event might just make the front page of the Gazette. Mrs. Pig clapped her trotters together. This was all very exciting, but if they were to have a party that very night, they had better get started. Yesterday. Not to worry, though. Mrs. Pig could whip up in an hour what would take other chefs a week. She rolled up her sleeves, tightened her pinafore, and spun on her skates, twirling right back into the kitchen. As the door swung closed, you could already hear her oinking instructions to Ozzy the octopus, their resident dishwasher, and clattering around with her pots and pans. Beans gave Chimpkin a very important mission: to spread the word and tell anyone she came across about the planetary parade party that would take place that evening. Chimpkin nodded solemnly. Then, in a rustle of feathers, she was off. The cats giggled as they watched her hop on her bicycle and pedal as fast as she could away across the plain. Chimpkin always took her tasks very seriously, and they knew she'd pedal all the way to the horizon if she had to. She was such a hard-working chook. The cats thought that Chimpkin would do a wonderful job bringing all their friends to the diner, but they thought they should also make sure any strangers driving by knew about the gathering too. So they set about making a huge poster to string up by the roadside. Beans used a silver glitter pen to write Planetary Parade Party, the time and the date in clear, swooping letters, whilst Potato drew all the planets around the edge. Beans thought a little more and then added a dress code. Astronomy chic. She didn't really know what that meant, but it felt right. She wanted the people to come all dressed up and shining like the stars. Potato stuck her tongue out as she doodled, drawing Mars in shining red, as that's the red planet, and Venus in baby pink, because a customer nearby told her that Venus was also the Roman goddess of love. She drew Jupiter in shining gold and made sure to loop Saturn with a big ring, since it's wrapped in a meteor belt. Finally, she drew Neptune and Uranus as little blue and purple dots, since they're so very far away. When they'd finished, Potato plonked her paw in the silver glitter paint and stamped it against the page, like an artist's signature. Finally, Ozzy was tasked with taking the sign and hanging it next to the tarmac, so everyone passing by would see it. When this was done, Potato and Beans headed into the kitchen to see what Mrs. Pig was busy with. There were already clouds of delicious smells drifting out of the kitchen, and Potato and Beans sniffed the air and rubbed their tummies as they went. Every gleaming surface of the kitchen was covered with mixing bowls and piles of flour and wobbling stacks of ingredients, from eggs to eggplants. Ozzy had hauled himself out of the bubbly sink and was helping Mrs. Pig with 2 tentacles rolling out dough with a ginormous rolling pin and another tentacle sifting flour over a big bowl. As he shook the sieve, he shimmied to the rock songs blaring out of his radio. Mrs. Pig was standing at the stove, where many pans were bubbling. Potato and Beans sidled either side of her and peered into the pan she was stirring. It was golden, sticky caramel. Potato's mouth began to water, and she went to dip a paw, but Mrs. Pig batted her away with the wooden spoon, chuckling and explaining that it was way too hot to taste test. She distracted her with a spare cracked biscuit that Potato chomped down in seconds. In a huge metal vat, a soup bubbled that smelled heavenly. Beans inhaled and swooned, twitching her whiskers. "What is that?" she asked. "It's French onion soup," Mrs. Pig said. "I learnt how to make it when I lived in Paris and studied at the Cordon Bleu cookery school." A fond, dreamy look took over her eyes. "After a long day baking buns and simmering sauces and pickling eggs, I would come home exhausted. All I wanted was to sit on my balcony, look out at the stars, and eat a hot bowl of soup, a hug in a mug, a puddle of cuddle. There's nothing more warming and wonderful, especially under the open sky." Beans was now inhaling the smell of the soup so deeply that her whiskers were just a whisker's width from touching its surface. Mrs. Pig slipped on the lid and put her arms around the cat's shoulders, steering them towards the door. "I think you two better get on with the decorations," she insisted. "Every planetary parade party needs confetti and, paper chains and party hats." Beans and Potato shared a look. They knew that Mrs. Pig was just trying to get them out of her way, but actually, those were all quite wonderful ideas. The cat friends took a walk around the outside of the diner and picked the spot for their open-air soiree. They picked a wide space ringed by a few cacti, as Beans had the idea that they could drape fairy lights from plant to plant to make a kind of fence. Then they set about dragging sofas and blankets and tables from the diner and arranging them under the sky. The sun began to arc lower in the sky, and the horizon started turning pink. Ozzy skated over with a stack of paper, and the three of them got to work. Ozzy's extra tentacles coming in handy as they folded, sliced and sticky-taped paper together to make long, looping paper chains in blue and silver that they draped around the party zone. They made paper-mâché planets in different sizes and colours, one for each planet they would see that night. And Potato made an extra imaginary planet she named after herself, which she painted brown and spotty. Next, they rolled silver cards into polished hats, adding a sparkling pom-pom on the top and looping elastic around the bottom. As for confetti, they plucked silvery leaves from a gum tree not too far away and scattered them amongst the other decorations. By the time everything was perfectly in place and the fairy lights were switched on, the sky was turning indigo, and far-off headlights were shining in the distance as their friends made their way to the diner. Mrs. Pig skated between the kitchen and party area with platter after platter, plate after plate of delicious food, which they all piled and arranged on a long table. Then they all headed back inside to get changed into their own planetary parade outfits. Potato and Beans headed up to their apartment above the shop and turned on some smooth disco music on their record player. Then they emptied their wardrobes into one big pile in the middle of their room, ready to choose their perfect outfit. They dug their paws in and rummaged through their jumpers and dresses and leggings and aprons, pulling anything that shone or shimmered. Potato headed into the bathroom with arms laden with clothes, whilst Beans continued laying outfits out on her bed, umming and ahhing about whether they'd make her eyes pop and her fur gleam. When Potato emerged, her entrance was announced by the opening bars of their favourite song. Beans' jaw dropped. She looked fantastic. Potato wore a pink t-shirt bejewelled with rhinestones in a sweeping rainbow, and around her round tummy she had clipped a belt with a big silver star-shaped buckle. She wore flared sequin trousers and a headband with 2 glittery pom-poms sticking out above her ears on wobbling springs. She was wearing her favourite cowboy boots and had smeared purple glitter around her eyes and running down her nose. She had a huge, silver, sparkly feather boa draped around her neck. Beans looked down at the much more sensible outfit she'd picked out for herself and threw it back into the pile, pulling out the most colourful, sparkling item she could find instead. That's how she ended up strutting down into the diner 5 minutes later in rainbow flip-flops, wearing a silver leather jacket with a fringe dangling from the arms and a purple sequin dress that shimmered like a galaxy. Mrs. Pig and Ozzy clapped at their arrival, since they looked so grand, like princesses paying them a visit. Mrs. Pig had used face paint to doodle little planets and shooting stars on her face, and she was wearing a green flowy gown with a blue pashmina. She said she dressed as her favourite planet, Earth. Ozzy was wearing a shirt of his favourite rock band, the Dustbin Lids. But he'd put a silver bangle on each tentacle and had a silver sparkly crown on his head that had a little star on each sparkling point. The headlights were glowing closer now, and the diner was abuzz with excitement. The first car to arrive was a pink Cadillac with the roof down, filled with instrument cases and boxes of wiry equipment. In the front seat was Tallulah Sparkles, the glamorous possum and former Hollywood star that lived just across the canyon. She was waving a scarf at them in hello and calling, "I've bought the music." As the cats began to heave the boxes from the car, they uncovered her bandmates, Sandy the skunk and Barry the bulldog, who were hidden beneath a guitar, a tangle of microphone wires, and a shining trombone. Once Barry could step out of the car, he used his bulldog muscles to heave all of the equipment into place, popping together slats to put up a mini stage and attaching a disco ball to dangle from a tall pole above what he was designating the dance floor. Next came Mr. Pig and the piglets, then Chimpkin and her mum, and Barbara the sheep. Next, Dallas Cassidy the cowboy, Zara the post dog, Turnip the pot-bellied pig and his friends. Soon every chair, beanbag and booth was taken. There were crowds of animals gazing in wonder at the shimmering decorations, salivating over the banquet, and swaying to the smooth jazz that Tallulah was now crooning through the microphone. She had changed into a pink tasselled dress and let her curls down from their curlers. She looked $1,000,000. One by one, animals began to point upwards as the stars began to twinkle overhead. There, amongst them, the planets shone, all 6 of them, gleaming down from their parade across the sky. Tallulah finished her song, then began to map the planets in the sky, pointing out Mars, Venus, Mercury, and Jupiter. Mr. Pig set up 2 big, complicated-looking telescopes, locking one in place to point up at Neptune and another at Uranus. Everyone gazed up above them in awe, and queues formed at the telescopes as people wondered at the planets and how far away they were, and how looking up at them made them feel so very small and special. While some animals were happy just imagining and dreaming about the planets above, Mr. Pig and Barbara the sheep were on hand to answer anybody's more scientific questions, like how our planetary system was formed 4.6 billion years ago, and how there are at least 100 billion galaxies in the universe, as well as our own. They explained that whilst we have only one moon on our planet, other planets have moons of their own, and Jupiter has 95. Can you imagine looking up at night and seeing more than one moon? After a while, people directed their gaze from the sky back to the earth, where the table of delicious food was calling their attention. Mrs. Pig began by ladling hot onion soup into mugs for everybody, setting a little hunk of cheesy toast on top of each one. As Beans slumped back in a deck chair, sipping the delicious soup, nibbling on stringy cheese and golden bread, she sighed in happiness. This was a night to remember. Tallulah was singing beautifully, as if she herself had been sent by the stars, and every animal in sight had a soft smile on their face. The atmosphere was simply magical, like she'd imagined a party on the moon, all soft, ethereal music and floating dresses and sparkly biscuits. She thought it was just perfect. Once the soup had been finished, the animals loaded plates with the other treats Mrs. Pig had rustled up. There were star-shaped shortbread biscuits decorated with little silver balls. There were cake pops on sticks, covered in icing of all colours and surrounded by sugar rings, making them look like dreamy marble-sized planets. There was a chocolate fountain, and ice cream in glittery bowls, and star fruit, and candy apples, and anything and everything you could dream of. Ozzy disappeared for a short while and came back with washing-up bowls full of warm, bubbly water, or, as he called them, foot spas, that animals could soak their paws, trotters, or hooves in whilst gazing up at the galaxies. He even brought a whole barrel full that he could slip into and use as a hot tub out onto the plains. He secretly decided this was such a good idea he would begin leaving it out so he could take his baths under the stars every night. At one point, there was a collective gasp as a shooting star sailed across the sky, and everyone squeezed their eyes shut to make wishes. Potato couldn't think of a wish. She thought there was no way to make this moment any better. Towards the end of the night, Ozzy tapped on the microphone and then tapped on his glass of lemonade, indicating he wanted to make a speech. "I just wanted to say," he began, "how lucky I feel to be here on this little floating planet with all of you fine folk. Of all the billions upon billions of planets, I'm glad I'm right here on planet Earth in the middle of nowhere at this charming diner with a bunch of kind animals around me." He raised his glass and everyone raised their own in agreement. Then he said his favourite 2 words, "Let's party." Mr. Hogg fired up a spotlight and swung it to shine on the disco ball, where it sent shimmers spinning and twirling across the plains, shining on smiling faces and glinting off sequins and sparkles. It felt like they had left the earth all together and were dancing amongst the stars. As Tallulah belted out some country hits, the animals gathered on the dance floor and began line dancing. They stepped and triple-stepped, hopped and glided, all in time, stomping back and forth across the dance floor with coordinated shimmies and spins. The music filled the valley, as did the laughter and the sound of tip-tapping boots. It wasn't until way after their usual bedtime that Potato and Beans finally arrived back in their bedroom, still humming dreamy tunes and tapping their toes to the music that was swimming around their heads. But now, sleep was crowding the corners of their eyes and making their eyelids heavy. Their warm showers made them purr sleepy purrs as they each buffed soap into bubbles and washed the glitter from their faces. Wrapped up in their fluffy dressing gowns, they yawned as the soft whir of the hairdryer made them sleepier and sleepier, warmer and fluffier and drier, until they were like 2 pom-poms in pyjamas. They brushed their teeth and combed their fur, and by the time they found themselves each pulling closed a curtain and saying goodbye to the day, they were almost asleep. They took a moment, paused in front of the window to look out at the planetary parade once more and say a sleepy thank you for the spectacle it provided, before tugging the drapes shut and each snuggling into their beds. Under the mounds of blankets, sleepy and cozy, and with hearts full of love, the 2 best friends mewed goodnight to one another and drifted off to long, dreamless sleeps. Let's now join Lily and Jake on their journey through the peaceful garden and see if we can allow the same sense of tranquility and peace and relaxation to gently flow through us too. This is The Jupiter Twins and the Garden of Meditation by Gillian Rogerson. Twins Lily and Jake Jupiter are students at the Leora Academy. It's a school of magic that's hidden beneath the busy streets of a city. Today, the twins have been called into their head teacher's office as she has something special to tell them. Let's join the twins now and hear what their head teacher has to say. Jake and Lily are sitting in their head teacher's office. Their kind head teacher, Dr. Howard, sits opposite them and smiles gently at the twins. She tells them about an enchanted area called the Garden of Meditation. All students at the Leora Academy have access to it and can go there anytime they want to. Dr. Howard explains that sometimes a student's head can become too full of all the new things they have to learn, and that it's important they take time out and go somewhere peaceful to rest their busy minds. The head teacher tells the twins that the Garden of Meditation is such a place, and it's time the twins paid it a visit because she had noticed how busy they'd been learning new spells recently. The twins nod and agree they have been busy with their studies. The head teacher tells them the Garden of Meditation is a lovely, relaxing place, and she often goes there. She goes on to say it's a place to let your thoughts drift gently away, and to just enjoy being in the present moment. She knows the twins will love the garden as much as she does. The head teacher wriggles her fingers in the air, and 2 star-shaped golden brown pebbles appear. She tells the twins they will need the pebbles to enter the magical garden and to exit it too. She says they have permission to visit the garden straight away. The pebbles float over to Lily and Jake and land in their open palms. The twins close their fingers around the pebbles and feel the warmth of them. The warm feeling flows down through their fingers, up through one arm and down into the other. The warm feeling flows gently through Lily and Jake and brings with it a sense of relaxation. The twins smile gently at each other. They ask their head teacher how they will get to the special garden. Dr. Howard says they should ask their magical pebbles to show them the way. The twins raise the star-shaped pebbles and notice the tiny sparkles inside them that twinkle and glimmer. They ask the pebbles to show them the way to the Garden of Meditation. The pebbles shine brightly, and a new door appears in the head teacher's office. It is the same golden brown colour as the pebbles. The twins stand up and walk over to the door. It magically opens, and the sweet sound of birdsong drifts through it. The twins say goodbye to their head teacher and walk through the open door and into the Garden of Meditation. The garden is filled with vibrant trees and flowers. Colourful birds dip through the air. Fluffy bees flit from one beautiful flower to another, and the sound of birdsong adds a soothing soundscape to the tranquil scene. The fragrant aroma of flowers and lavender washes over the twins and makes them relax even more. The twins see a glimmering golden path winding through the trees and flowers. It glitters and shimmers brightly in the sunshine. The door gently closes behind the twins, and they put the magical pebbles securely into their pockets. A golden ray of sunlight flows down over them, slowly and gently, from the top of their heads all the way down to their feet. Lily and Jake feel so very relaxed and warm. They take some deep, relaxing breaths, breathing in and slowly letting it out. Breathing in and out, in and out. The twins walk along the glittering golden path, their steps slow and leisurely. The sunlight continues to flow gently over them. They look at the lush green leaves on the trees that line the path. The leaves rustle softly in the warm breeze. The melody coming from the birds in the treetops changes tempo and slows down to a gentle, soothing tune. The twins slow their steps to match the soothing song coming from the birds. Lily and Jake share a soft smile. There is nowhere else they have to be, and nothing else they have to do. Already, their minds are beginning to feel free of any thoughts about their schoolwork. Those thoughts can wait until another time. They continue to walk slowly along the golden path. They gaze softly at the flowers and see roses as red as rubies, sunny yellow daisies and pale pink carnations. Lily and Jake trail their fingers through the flowers and feel how soft and velvety the petals are. The flowers release their sweet perfumes into the air, and the aroma wraps around the twins in a tranquil cloud of relaxation. Lily and Jake feel so very calm and restful. They take some more deep, relaxing breaths. They stroll on and listen to the soft sound of the bees buzzing through the garden, and hear the gentle rustle of the trees and the melodies of the birds. They see a small pond up ahead that is surrounded by rocks and wild flowers. The water in the pond glows with a soft blue light, and the twins move closer to it. As they reach the pond, they look into the clear water and see dozens of shimmering fish swimming in slow, leisurely circles. The fish leave trails of shimmering light in their wake that twinkle in the sunlight. The twins sit on the soft grass at the side of the pond and gaze softly at the shimmering fish moving slowly through the water. The sun bathes them in its gentle heat, and a soft breeze flows over them. Birds sing softly from the treetops, and their melody echoes through the enchanted garden. The air is fragrant with the soothing scent of flowers and lavender. The twins close their eyes and take some deep breaths, letting the tranquility and calmness of the garden wash over them. They sit for a while and bask in the peacefulness of their surroundings. After a few minutes, they open their eyes and see a cloud of beautiful silver butterflies fluttering over to them. As the butterflies get closer, the twins notice how their wings are edged in glittering hues of sapphire and emerald. The butterflies bob gently in the air next to the twins. The twins sense that the butterflies want to lead them somewhere. Lily and Jake rise from the soft grass, and as they do so, the butterflies flutter slowly along the golden path and further into the garden. The twins follow the beautiful butterflies and soon find themselves standing in front of a maze that is made from waist-high hedges. Each hedge is perfectly trimmed, and they form a series of pathways and turns. The butterflies bob in front of the entrance to the maze. The twins move closer to their fluttering guides and smile softly at them. The butterflies flutter through the entrance and proceed to lead Lily and Jake along the gentle twists and turns of the maze at a slow and steady pace. The twins find their minds relaxing more and more as they follow the kind butterflies. As they walk along, The twins notice the leaves on the hedges at their sides changing colour, from a vibrant green to a warm shade of gold. A relaxing lullaby arises from the hedges and echoes gently through the maze. Being led through the maze makes Lily and Jake relax more and more. The grass is soft beneath their feet, and the air is warm. They focus softly on the changing colour of the leaves and listen to the soothing lullaby drifting through the air. The butterflies lead the twins to the centre of the maze, where they find a clearing with a large square of golden sand. 2 rakes rest on the sand, and the twins give them a quizzical look. A butterfly flutters over to one of the rakes and slowly opens and closes its wings above it. The rake rises and moves slowly across the sand, with its prongs gliding through the golden grains. It creates wavy lines in the soft sand. The butterfly rests its wings, and the rake settles on the sand once more. The butterfly flies back to Jake and Lily and seems to give them a silent message as to how they should use the rakes. The twins realise the rakes are magical ones that can be controlled by their movements. Jake and Lily slowly wave their hands in the air, and the 2 rakes rise and begin to move across the sand, reflecting the twins' movements. Jake and Lily move their hands more and more, and then sway them from side to side. The magical rakes follow their movements and create pleasing swirls and lines in the sand. The twins get lost in the mesmerizing movement of the rakes and sway themselves from side to side. They move their arms through the air in gentle circles and wave-like motions. They feel as fluid and smooth as the wind as they continue to create invisible patterns in the air. The magical rakes copy their every move, and new patterns appear in the sand. The twins continue to dance slowly in partnership with the rakes. They smile softly as the shape of the wind becomes an image in the sand. After a while, the twins lower their arms. The magical rakes move away from the sand and rest lightly on the grass at the side of it, allowing the twins to take in the full beauty of the artwork they have created together. The patterns in the sand are intricate and mesmerizing. Loops and swirls interlock with each other to form a series of spirals that look like galaxies in miniature. The sand glitters in the sunlight, reflecting the light and adding to the magical appearance of the patterns. Lily and Jake sit in front of the sand and gaze at the beauty of the unique image they have created. They take some more deep breaths and allow peace and tranquility to flow easily through them. After some peaceful minutes, they stand up and have a long stretch. They turn around and see the butterflies resting on top of the hedges. The butterflies are fast asleep. Lily and Jake give their kind guides a silent nod of thanks and head back through the maze. They follow the line of gold-coloured leaves and effortlessly find their way back to the beginning. They step out of the maze and continue strolling along the golden path through the enchanted garden. The sun bathes them in its gentle heat, and a soft breeze flows over them. Birds sing softly from the treetops, and their melody echoes through the garden of meditation. The air is fragranced with the soothing scent of flowers and lavender. With each step they take, the twins become more and more relaxed, immersed in the magic and wonder of the garden. They see a smaller path up ahead that leads towards a large flower garden. They step onto the path and walk along its meandering curves further into the centre of the flower garden. They gaze lightly at each beautiful blossom that they pass. The flowers are in every colour imaginable, from bright red poppies to soft blue forget-me-nots. There are clusters of pink roses that fill the air with their gentle perfume, and patches of yellow daffodils that shine like tiny suns. Some flowers smoothly change colour from purple to green and to gold and back again. A light breeze travels through the flowers, and a soft song begins to arise from them. The twins stop and listen to the floral melody. It's a soothing sound and fills their hearts with love and gratitude. They stay where they are, gazing at the rainbow of flowers and listening to the magical song. The twins turn slowly around, fully absorbed in the present moment. They linger for a few more magical moments and listen to the song of the flowers. Then they walk away from the garden and back onto the golden path. The twins walk on, feeling calm and tranquil. The sun bathes them in its gentle heat, and a soft breeze flows over them. Birds sing softly from the treetops, and their melody echoes through the enchanted garden. The air is fragranced with the soothing scent of flowers and lavender. With each step they take, the twins become more and more relaxed, immersed in the magic and wonder of the garden. In the distance, they hear the sound of falling water. They head along the path, and the sound gently increases in volume. The twins arrive at a spectacular waterfall that cascades over rocks and into a pool of shimmering water. The waterfall is surrounded by lush greenery and bright flowers. A light mist covers the flowers and makes them shimmer and glimmer in the sunlight. The curtain of falling water slowly changes colour, and a kaleidoscope of shades ripples through it from one side to the other, and then back again. Droplets of falling water land on the rocks and create a rhythmic tempo like a soft drumbeat. The twins walk closer to the waterfall and feel a light mist settle softly on their faces. They focus their gaze on the changing colours of the falling water, watching as one colour merges smoothly into another. Red to orange, orange to yellow, yellow to green, green to blue, blue to indigo, indigo to violet, violet to lilac, lilac to pink, and pink to red. As easily as the water flows over the rocks, calmness and serenity flows through the twins. Jake and Lily close their eyes and let the soft mist settle on their eyelids. The sound of the falling water mingles with the ever-present melody coming from the birds. The twins keep their eyes closed and become delightfully lost in the present moment, feeling at one with the magic and tranquility of the enchanted garden. After a few blissful minutes, they open their eyes and smile softly at each other. Jake lets out a long, long yawn. Lily lets out an equally long yawn. The twins are pleasantly sleepy, but don't want to leave the garden of meditation just yet. They walk away from the wonderful waterfall, ready to explore a little more of the garden. Lily and Jake walk along the garden path, feeling calm and tranquil. The sun bathes them in its gentle heat, and a soft breeze flows over them. Birds sing softly from the treetops, and their melody echoes through the enchanted garden. The air is fragranced with the soothing scent of flowers and lavender. With each step they take, the twins become more and more relaxed, immersed in the magic and wonder of the garden. Ahead of them, they see the opening of a cave. A glimmering light comes from within the cave and pulls softly across the golden path. Lily and Jake walk into the cave. It is warm and cozy inside. Huge soft cushions made from soft velvet are scattered across the floor. They look so very inviting that the twins sink into the cushions with a soft, relaxed sigh. They lay down on their backs and look at the ceiling of the cave. It is embedded with twinkling crystals. Each crystal shines as brightly as the stars in the night sky. Jake and Lily make themselves more comfortable on the soft cushions and gaze at the beautiful crystals as they twinkle and shimmer. The precious gems cast a soft glow throughout the cave. The twins hear the distant sound of the waterfall and the light melody of the singing birds. A warm breeze drifts into the cave and flows gently over the resting twins. Lily yawns. Jake does too. They feel so very calm and peaceful, and very tired too. They look at the shimmering crystals, and their eyes begin to feel heavy. They can feel themselves drifting towards sleep. As delightful as the cave is, they don't want to fall asleep there, and decide it is time to leave the garden of meditation. They sit up and take the star-shaped pebbles from their pockets. They ask the pebbles to take them back to the school. The pebbles shine brightly, and the magical door that they saw earlier appears at the side of the cave. It slowly swings open, and they see the school corridor on the other side of it. The twins stand up and walk through the door and back into their school. Their head teacher, Dr. Howard, is waiting for them. She can tell by their restful smiles that the twins have had a relaxing time in the garden of meditation. She reminds Jake and Lily they can return to the magical garden any time they want to. Jake and Lily nod, and then put their hands over their mouths to cover up the yawns that keep escaping. They ask if they can have an early night because they're so very tired. Dr. Howard nods and says goodnight to the tired twins. The twins say goodnight and head towards their dormitories. Outside their rooms, they say goodnight to each other and agree they've had a most magical time in the garden of meditation, and a restful one too. They know they will sleep well that night. They say goodnight and go their separate ways. As they snuggle down in their beds minutes later, they remember the peaceful sights and sounds of the enchanted garden. Relaxation flows through them from the top of their heads to the tips of their toes. They snuggle down in their warm, cozy beds. They are so peaceful and sleepy, and so very, very tired. They smile softly to themselves, yawn, and easily drift into a deep, restful sleep.